Welcome to everyone. And if I could begin with this note, I would like everyone in the room to give a loud welcome to everyone else in the room. Right? You are here because you are in chapter leadership positions, I'm assuming, or you desire to be in chapter leadership positions, or you're volunteering, or you have a passion. And that is why we put together this panel discussion. For those of you who attended the session earlier with Marlene Baker from the Calgary chapter, was it not the most phenomenal representation of what a chapter can do, right? Absolutely. And if you weren't here for that, I encourage everyone, pull down those slides. Marlene has, and not just Marlene, the comment I took from Marlene's presentation was that they have had 4 presidents. Each one has been a business leader. They started strategy from day 1. And that's how they have sustained that level of excellence, that performance level that I think we all strive to do. We are not going to repeat the same things that Marlene went over. What we have done here is assemble our own panel of people throughout the world. We have a diverse representation. Let me introduce and give a welcome to our panelists. Ladie Rickard, who I had the privilege of seeing and meeting with your board in Phoenix.
Yes.
Ladie brings a perspective of governance. She has worked with nonprofit organizations. She has done remarkable things with her chapter and brings that to our presentation. Please give a welcome to Ladie. Curtis Michelson, who I've had the privilege of working with now for 3 or 4 years, right? Co-chair of the chapter maturity model, now president of the Central Florida chapter. Anything I know about visualization, ideation, I learned from Curtis.
Thank you.
Ryan Folster from South Africa. Ryan is VP of Technology. Ryan brings enablement to the South Africa chapter. The South Africa chapter has perfected the hub and spoke model of having a centralized organization with multiple, you call them
Branches.
Branches, okay? Yeah. I'm sorry, branches. Ryan has also brought to us the Zoom technology, which you see. Let me take a second and just introduce our representatives from around the world. We are being monitored and listened to by people in South Africa, Nashville, Waterloo, Wellington, Boston, Hartford, South Africa, and other parts I don't have up here, right, that I haven't captured yet. Welcome to everyone here. Let's give a welcome to our worldwide audience. Before I get back to my panel, let me note that our worldwide audience will be able to talk to us via Francine. Francine is former president of the New Jersey chapter, where I'm from. Francine will be looking at the chat, and I'll ask Francine from time to time, is there something, a comment, a question that we want to bring to the room, and that's how we will bring that in.
I did notice that there was one person on the chat who gave clap, clap, clap.
Excellent. And by the way, we are also very much into the Twittersphere, right? So we are being tweeted, and we will monitor tweets as well. We encourage anyone to use hashtag BBCCon, or if you want to get really specific, hashtag BBCConChatMat for chapter maturity, right? BBCConChatMat.
Right.
Back to our, by the way, everybody here has a handle on Twitter as well. So if I could point it out, we have at Ladie K. Rickard, R-I-C-K-A-R-D. We have SpexRex, my good friend Curtis at SpexRex. We have at Ryan Folster SA. We have from UK, Adrian. Adrian Reed has helped build the UK chapter from what was starting out in London and then going to Wales and Scotland and other places, and has helped that chapter grow and develop and understand what chapters need and how they get involved and how to do all of that governance. Brings that perspective as well. And then Aleš Stumpahar from Slovenia. Aleš helped found the Slovenia chapter, a small country, economically challenged in some ways, difficult issues, So we have brought together a panel of people with very diverse styles, diverse chapters, diverse experiences, but all of whom have something to contribute to what we're going to be talking about today, which is leaders and leadership. Did I cover Wendy? No. Wendy, excuse me. Wendy is also going to be capturing our discussion via a mind mapping tool. So as we have topics come up, we will see it on our screen, and everybody, again, in our worldwide audience, will be able to see that as well. So give another round of applause for our panelists, our worldwide, everybody in the room. With that, let me begin by having a simple question. We'll get right into strategy. All right? I'm going to try to get through as many possible questions as we can in this short hour that we have. How do you get board members to think and behave strategically? Is this not an issue that everyone faces? All right? How do we get board members to think and behave strategically? Alice, would you like to start with that one?
Okay. First of all, you must know what is your purpose. So, and my duty was that how some brings them to the point of business view on business analyst. Because at the beginning there are a lot of IT members. So this is quite a big challenge to focus them on the strategic things. So, but we make it with the book. So
I did not mention, I should have, thank you for reminding me. Alice is also the author of Future-Proof Business Approaches. We will have one copy of this to give away at the end. I'll figure out sometime during this presentation how we're going to determine the winner of that. Maybe it's the most creative tweets. Maybe it'll be the best participation. We'll come up with that later. Or I could do that.
it is in English, yes.
Anyone else like to contribute to the question?
I think, I mean, I'd pick up on what Alesh is saying, is you have got to be really clear about that purpose. And there's a lot about distilling it into something which is internalizable, memorable, and repeatable. You just can't have, as volunteers, you can't have 1,000-page strategic manuals. You've got to have something, you know, a catchphrase, whatever you want to call it, that you refer back to, you sense check. Are we heading towards that, aren't we? It helps with decision making, so making it really concise, compelling.
Peter, I'd like to add something. I think a big piece of it is stabilizing operations. And because that's all we're focused on is making sure that we're ready for a meeting, etc. So you stabilize operations and then you start to dream. And out of that dream and what you can see it grow as, you can focus on strategy. Once we're all aware, we know our parts, we have our marching orders, we know what to do just to make it run. We don't even talk about that much anymore. You know, your focus changes to talking strategically.
Excellent.
So on my side, I'd say you got to sort of focus on people's strengths and weaknesses. Some people are naturally not strategic thinkers, some people are. And there's benefits to both of them. And our board in South Africa, and I'll probably see our president nodding her head there if I could see, but some of us are operationally based, some of us are out there thinkers, some of us, and the people that are out there thinkers need the control, and the people that are the operational based needs to, you know, so you add those different lenses on and force the strategy and sort of work together towards it.
Yeah, and I would agree with that as well. We used a tool recently in a board retreat, StrengthsFinder. How many of you know StrengthsFinder? Okay. Jackie, wait, raise your hand, Jackie. VP membership in Orlando, so glad she's here. Correct me if I'm wrong. We used it as a retreat tool, and the latest iteration of StrengthsFinder, and basically if you don't know it, it's a tool for knowing your strengths, okay? It's like many other types of these typing tools. But the latest iteration of the book is StrengthsFinder Leadership. And in leadership, they coalesce those strengths into 4 critical kind of categories. There's strategic thinking, which really by that they mean analytical thinking. There's influence and relationship building. Influence and then relationship building, those are 2 separate, like networking, and then there is execution. And we found, Guess where most of our BAs fell, in which bucket? Anyone want to guess? No, strategic. The data showed, and we graphed it. It was fun. We had a laugh and a lot of analytical, ideation, input, intellection, data hungry. It's okay, and I agree with him entirely. You don't have to have everybody on the board that's doing strategic, but you definitely has to be represented somewhere in your leadership team.
I want to build off Curtis's point, because another idea in the book is that you recruit people on the team who represent different styles. You don't recruit functional roles. You don't recruit somebody to do marketing, et cetera, as we have most of our bylaws and our VPs of this and VPs of that. But it recommends that you build a team with complementary styles, so that one person doesn't have to have all of them, but you have people who are good at the relationship building, good at the executing, good at the strategic thinking, right? And that's a great way to do it. So one thing, and I'm going to go right back to Curtis on this one. One thing Curtis has done with his board, by the way, he's been there for now 3 months, 4 months?
In this position,
yes.
9 months.
9 months,
yeah.
Time goes by quickly, right? One thing, I'll come right back. One thing that you've done is change how that board thinks about governance, right? So would you talk about that for a minute? Bring that example up.
And let me put a little frame around that first. When we first started the chapter maturity project, Peter, you remember the model that we created? We had the 5 KPAs: leadership, operations, promotions, education, and governance. And we did that first survey in 2012. We were really trying to see where chapters were on those different categories of activity. Governance seemed to be a weak point. It seemed to be one of those areas that all of us, and I see a nodding head already, all of us kind of neglect, and I did too, frankly, until I stepped into the role and I started to realize, and I think my VP membership started to cry out for some guidelines and some governance and some processes. So what we've done is first did a push towards our vision and mission, really clarify strategy. But the real push for us now is governance, because we realize that's the deep enabler. That's what's going to give us the new structure that we need to support leaders and sustainability and to be able to scale. So it's really, I'd love to hear what some of the other panelists are doing. You've worked, you're in the governance space a bit right now.
We are, and
policies.
We are. Oh, you mean for the chapter?
Yeah.
I mean, we are in the process of breaking those apart. You know, pulling out procedures from policies so that you're not so bound by a process. You're following a guideline.
Ladie, talk about your story in terms of how you brought people on board, how you did onboarding.
Oh, my favorite success is after being in the position for a year, you notice that I took a lot of time teaching people and a lot of time getting people up to speed. So what we adopted was a 60-day up and running onboarding process. And we formally walked everyone through moving into their office. I think that one thing that doesn't happen with a chapter is that you realize that it is a business and that there is an office space and you have your emails and your in basket, and that should be an office, just like you wouldn't mix your Gmail with your @company address. You know, I really try to push everybody to be phoenix.iiba.org, and that moving into the office and you only respond with your office address. You know, you wouldn't send it to a coworker in your business with my Yahoo address. So, you know, let's be phoenix.iiba.org and treat that as a real, it is real. Treat it as a real organization. Give it the respect due.
Before we get too far along, I just want to go back and recognize one question from the floor. Did we hear the question? How often does your board turn over, and does that affect strategic thinking?
So our board, we have quite a few people that have been there for quite a while. So I've been there for quite a while, and Des and Janet on the line, and Lucy have all been on the board for quite a while. So we have quite a problem getting new people in and moving out, old people out. I don't say old, I say people have been there for longer out. And what we're trying to do now, so one of the objectives for me this year is to actually work myself out of a position so that we can document the knowledge, put it down, and get someone else to take over that position, because there needs to be that moving through, and you actually have to focus your strategy on keeping up with that and keeping new people coming in and old people going out. You have to actually strategize to do that. Otherwise, you'll just end up an old boys club where, you know, where everyone's it's the same people that are hanging out there and the new ideas aren't coming out and delivering value.
And Alesh, in terms of starting a chapter from scratch, what kind of a challenge was that?
Oh, you know, with 2 million people, you can do just slowly progress to.
You have 2 million in your chapter? Wow.
Almost.
Almost.
No, in Slovenia, there are just 2 million inhabitants, so half of Miami. So it was a challenge to find the right people. But around me were about 10 my friends with the same, you know, thinking to do something new, to challenging the executives, and on the other hand, the IT guys, how to come together in mostly at the beginning of the IT projects.
And I think this is a point that we've reinforced in the different surveys that we've done, where boards that work well together can do fabulous things together. Boards that don't work well together, that don't have that chemistry, that we're, as a leader, we haven't built that chemistry, never seem to get to that plateau of functioning, and that's where you have the higher turnover. I know in our particular board example, somebody made the comment at one point that it's not fun anymore. If it's not fun anymore, they're not going to stay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Collaboration within the board is important. I mean, we
Yeah.
always talk about collaboration, but you've got to be able to collaborate together, work together well.
Team as a strategy is very important. At the beginning, we are very, you know, openness and friendly and share our thoughts and do together a future of the chapter.
Okay, Curtis.
Let me go back to the governance and maybe explain just a little bit more why we're driving into it, because we're all concerned about the burnout and the churn. And what we're actually in the middle of right now is rewriting our bylaws, and we call it putting it on a slim fast diet, okay? I know all of our bylaws look the same because, you know, we all talk to each other and we all copied the original bylaws, right? It was a gigantic copy and paste operation. And I think it was Gary, you hear from Ottawa? Gary told me this story. We found out the original version came from PMI because they just realized a few months ago they had to take out project management from the bylaws. Am I paraphrasing it correctly?
Find and replace.
Find and replace. So we have not done original thinking in governance, okay? So our thought was strip out everything in the bylaws that is an operational type of related item. Move it into something we're going to call the policy book or a guidebook. That's your governance piece. It's going to give leadership, dynamic leadership, fluid leadership. So Jackie, VP membership, I'm just going to say, she's going through some situation, she's got a kid or whatever, no problem. That team is running on its own. They are not elected. They are not replaced with an election. The elected board is a governing board that's minding risk, fiduciary responsibilities, legal responsibilities. And if you get to South Africa size, and or a UK size, and you got 50, 60K, 100K in the bank, you could become a target. You need to mind those things, right? And so for us, we want to say, okay, elect those people who know how to run the nonprofit. And I see IIBA doing a similar thing right now. I see Stephen in the back, Stephen Ashworth, our new CEO. I'm glad you're here. And you build an effective leadership team that executes strategy. But that governing board is worrying about other things. Is that correct, Stephen? Thank you. Okay.
And I wanted to give a little shout out to Joanne, who yesterday was telling us how it's so important to understand what are the principles more than the practices. That same point was made by Jonathan Babcock at another presentation. If anybody heard Jonathan, where you do principles, not prescriptives. Set out the principles in your guidelines.
Right.
Let other people do the execution with those principles in mind.
Guardrails.
And if I could also do one more shout out to Kathy from Cedar Rapids. There are 2 chapters in Iowa. From Cedar Rapids. Kathy, when we did our last survey asking questions about leaders and leadership, wrote to us and had a specific question. Kathy, would you just relate what that story was and what you're doing with that information?
Sure, and I'll stand up. I'm talking people back. For those of you on the phone, I'm really short. That's what I'm talking to people back. But I just simply asked can we get a copy of the results when everybody requested or what everybody put in their answers? Because that is the foundation of what our next strategic board meeting is going to be. I didn't need to recreate questions. I'll just use those, and then we'll have a very open and honest conversation with what people already answered, and then bring that into the goals so that we can build our.
So for clarification, we will return back to an individual, the individual's answers. We're not returning anyone's answers back to anyone else. And the point is that that becomes a topic of conversation that the board can have. It's amazing when we did the survey how we asked 4 people from one board one question, we got 5 different answers, right? And it's critical, and we would recommend that all boards consider taking that questionnaire and making that a discussion within the board. Talk about leaders, talk about leadership, talk about styles, talk about what works and what doesn't work. You'll have to talk very loud for us.
And Peter, you have to repeat it for our Zoom guests. Yeah.
In Liverpool, we had a weekend away to talk about our strategy. I actually brought in an expert to facilitate us. So somebody who works with businesses to create strategy, and she helped us create a strategy on the page. So we thought that was a really good use of our time and our money to actually get somebody in to really help us go through how to create that strategy. Who does this all the time with other facilitating other businesses, so that we can actually create a strategy on the page that we now have a plan to work through. So,
Just to chime in there, Peter.
Go ahead, Adrian.
Because that's such a fantastic idea. And
Could you recapture it while you're doing?
And Peter, we need to repeat it for the Zoom guests because they haven't heard the
apologies,
question.
yeah.
Or Adrian, you can do it.
Yeah. So I think the essence from New Zealand was that there was an external facilitator who enabled the team to create a one-page strategy on a page. That really resonates with me. One of the things we did in the UK was we created it was supposed to be a one-page visual canvas. It ended up being 2 pages, but we kept it at 2. And this had, I mean, for example, it had strategy. It also had some really clear objectives and some strategic themes. If you want to see it, you can download it from our website. But for example, the objective that we are all aiming for is 1,000 members by the end of 2015. We were aiming for 24 events this year and a 97% net approval. So essentially 97% of people would recommend us to a colleague. There were then certain strategic themes beneath that, like getting the basics right. Because believe it or not, only a year ago, we weren't doing things like issuing membership renewal reminders as regularly as we should be. So there were some process changes. So once you secure the base, you can then get into the more interesting stuff like really knowing our members. So there was a lot in there about let's actually get to know what our members want, which is I think we all need to ask often. We need to keep that customer heart of what we do, and our other stakeholders like EPs and so forth.
So also chime in here. So I think that's fantastic, a fantastic comment. And what comes down to my mind is it's use the right tool for the right job. As a BA, you might have strategic thinking, but you're not a strategist. Well, you could be, but let's go with you're not. Hiring a professional that knows exactly how to do that can get you those results in a much shorter time. And I think you talked about it previously. You said, the board should be a board that makes decisions, but we're not marketing experts. We're not technology experts. So get the right people into the right job.
Right.
And I think that's a fantastic idea, and I'd love to try it in the SA chapter.
Francine, question from our audience.
Blinko from South Africa.
She wants to know, what approach do the different chapters use to encourage and attract members to stand for board positions?
Great question. Did everyone hear that? Anyone like to respond? Go ahead.
So I think the question was for those on the line, or is there a microphone there? Oh, okay, so they would have seen it, I see.
Okay.
So encouraging people into board membership positions. I'll be completely frank, and in the UK we struggle. Okay, we have 2-year terms as well. I mean, I guess there's times when you need stability on the board, and we've needed a period of stability, which is why we've kept the 2-year term. What we are aiming for, we're not there yet. Where we have volunteers, so we have a branch model similar to South Africa. So we have a central board. We have branches which cover the regions like Scotland, North, London, and South, and so forth. Where I think we'd like to get to is that there's almost this is a cliche, but a talent pipeline, where you've got someone who's an impassioned volunteer, and maybe they start with a project. Then they join, they start organising events in a branch. Then a board position becomes available, and they stand for it. And you have the people who are experienced and ending their term for whatever reason are almost round the edge to provide support. So we want to get to that talent pipeline, but frankly, at the moment, it's hard. It's hard.
When we did our survey, we asked what boards needed to do to be more successful. Pipelining was right at the top of that list. It's something that boards are not doing now. It's something we need to do. And I wanted to take that as a segue, and I'm going to ask Curtis to respond to this one. Curtis has a unique view of his role as president. It's not to stay as president forever. How would you describe it?
Well,
because it has everything to do with this idea of
well, my secret
people
agenda
in.
is, right? No.
Goes to succession planning.
Yeah. And I guess this ties to what you're saying. First of all, I've banished the word committee. I don't want to have standing committees. I believe in task forces. I think people respond well, I think this is directly tied to agile success. Time box, give a task to a team, high expectation, high goal, short time box, and make sure people are fit to that task. It's the right people for that job. And your pipeline begins to fill. That's what we're finding. So we set up a vision task force. I found 3 or 4 people that were ideal for that role, just talking to them at board meetings or at events. And they delivered, and they got excited because they just rewrote our vision and mission. These people are deeply invested now. It's now their vision and mission. And that, just FYI, our vision is to be the regional leader in strategic business analysis, okay? And we have a mission that breaks that down a little further, which even uses the BACM, the BA core concept model, and the 5 perspectives from BABAC V3. So V3 isn't even out yet, but it's April 2015. And we're already using some of those ideas because the perspectives is something that really helps us sell the value prop that, hey, yeah, BAs play in all these different spaces. And I've been selling some sponsorships around that. It's very, very helpful. So I guess if I'm answering your question.
I wanted to go back to the other aspect of that then in terms of succession planning. And
right.
You had made the comment in one of our earlier discussions that you want to see that the next president.
I think that as soon as you inherit the title president, probably the top of your portfolio of activity is finding the replacement for you. And that's a principle that we want to embed in our policy guidebook. One of the principles in that policy book is no matter where you're at, VP membership or whatever you take on, it's each one reach one. You're constantly training somebody. That just needs to be in the DNA. This is a volunteer organization. People are going to churn. You have to be prepared for it.
And I think that staying a long time should be a personal option, because I think saying that a 2-year commitment is a bit scary. Now, until you stepped across the line, and then your 2 years is going to fly as if it is not enough time. I think that the pipeline, the smaller positions, my son went to a school and they had the positions where the Mothers Guild could volunteer from everything from running their huge fashion show, which is a huge time commitment, down to being on the Cookie Mom team. And that means you were just responsible for 3 dozen cookies a couple times a year. So you got into that, and as he progressed through high school, it was more and more commitment because you found more and more fun involvement. And so I think that we've struggled with board positions, we've struggled with turnover, but this year with this selection, the 50% of the board that is up for renewal is staying. And I am thrilled beyond belief because we don't have to experience a downtime, a training period for half of the board. So they are staying. They're going to continue our work.
And I'm going to go back to a comment that Francine has made to me many times, that you find what people like to do, and then you find what they can do, and you give them a small task, if it's a small task. And that's what you expect. You know, and then you find other people who like to do other things, can do more things. And you support the board with the volunteers, because the board can't run the chapter. If there's one takeaway, I hope we know the board cannot run the chapter. Yes, Gary.
I come from a chapter that actually ran for years, always had operation, and I tried when I last to move it. We just have to and then volunteers how here how many hours and they not everything volunteers.
Right. So for our international audience, the comment is that we get so involved in trying to do the operations. How do you get volunteers to help do some of that work, right? So that you can free yourself up to do more of the strategic planning, et cetera. I'm going to open that up for some general comment in a second, but I want to add a comment from my introduction to the Hong Kong chapter a few weeks ago. I had a privilege of going out there. I loved it. But Joy Hogwood, who took over the presidency of that chapter, brought in a business plan. She had people develop a business plan. The business plan survives. People can come and go, and then they step into that role. The business plan is there, right? They don't have to recreate it. And there's some degree of execution that's expected. And then they go and build the team that can help take care of that business plan and accomplish it. And it can always be adjusted, but that's a board function. I wanted to get someone's comments on what about a business plan? Is that a good strategy, not a good strategy? And we're going to get to Gary's question too. Anyone?
I think that having a stable business plan is a great way to go. We had also, when we had our conversation, talked about that 5-year vision, and you know, the discussion was, well, you can't, how can you have that when you really don't know? And having a stable business plan gives people, we all know this as BAs, something to edit. And people will come out of the woodwork very able to edit something, but to write original content, you know, it's harder. It's just harder. It's much easier to sit down with. I like that idea of a stable business plan, and that you're only looking at how to change it. You're not looking at a new one for this year.
Alice, did you have a comment to add there?
Oh, I like the business plan in Forum of Business Canvas by Osterwald, because immediately in the middle is the value for the other people. We are not just here to serve our members. We are here to serve managers and I don't know, association for managers and other associations.
How many chapters in the room have used the business model canvas as a planning tool? Is there anybody who would speak against using that? How great has it been for you? Just, I want to get, that was a very biased question. Okay. And that's what we're referring to. It's one of the components which help you look at that.
It is not just planning tool. It is a tool with, you know, you realize why you are here and what are key activities and especially partners.
Right, so this goes to your point, Gary, of understanding what you want to do, and then you get into what are the resources, what are the partnerships you need to have, you know, what's the infrastructure to support that, and it helps everybody focus on what's the problem to solve, and then figure out how to solve that problem. How many of us get involved in just solving incidental issues? We're off working on stuff that's not providing value, right? We have to use business planning to help do that.
Peter, if I could, there's a data point from the survey we should probably share. We asked, on average, how many board officers do you have? The average was 7. So some were 6, 7, 8, some 3, 4, but it was average at 7. And we asked how many volunteers typically support those 7 individuals. It was 4.
For a whole chapter.
For the whole chapter. That ratio should be at least the other way around. There should be twice as many volunteers to board officers. If you get to that lucky point, then Gary, problem is half solved because you've got a lot of hands on deck to do the event management and all the other stuff that we do operationally. But that goes back to talent pipelining and all the other things we touched on.
And what we heard from Calgary this morning, 8 board members, 40 volunteers.
Right.
Yes.
That's a ratio.
Yep.
So a question I have is, and it's more a question for everyone out here, we work a lot on value propositions for our membership. So we want to get our members to understand what the value proposition is of being a member. But do we spend time working on what the value proposition is for being a board member? I think there's value in doing that, because then, I mean, no one just does anything just for the fun of it. We all do it for a reason. We get something out of being part of the IIBA, and we get something out of being a part of the board. So how often do we put down on paper what that value proposition is?
Excellent point. Any other comments on that? Any questions, comments on that from the floor? Yes, Alba. Really loud for us, Alba.
Just to echo a little bit what Mary was saying, and we're in the same boat. We're so busy running the show that we can't recruit. And when we do try to recruit, they say, "Oh my gosh, you spent how much time?" I'll see you at me. So, what are some tips or tricks or tips from people who have been there and on the other side on how do you break that cycle to actually start getting volunteers invested and break the scare of all the operations that the board is busy running right now?
If you prove the value, I mean, if you tell me it's going to take 10 hours to do something, there's a lot of value in it for me, I might want to do it. But if there's no value in it, yeah, it's showing value.
I think that's a really important point. We faced exactly that issue in the UK when I first joined the board. I was elected as marketing director originally, and I'm now on a subsequent term. And the challenge was we were spending so much time doing, we had no time to think strategically. And we were basically just keeping ourselves above the waterline. You know, the events happened, and our members loved them, but behind the scenes, it's like, behind the scenes, it was far less. It was frantic at times, and I'm sure we've all been there. The way we approached it was we made a recognition that essentially we need to start thinking about, as you would if you're a business, what can you automate, what can you outsource? So automate, improve, outsource, or well, rather improve, automate, outsource. And so one of the things that I did first off as marketing director is I changed the way we issued email communication. And that was a really neat package that you could give a volunteer. And it doesn't take that long. It's only a few hours per event. And I found a volunteer who said, I'm really interested in getting into marketing. And it was like, great, well, okay, would you do our email shots? Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Then when she became more up to speed with that, she was like, oh, I'd be interested in doing some of your web content. Great, fantastic. Yeah. But we started small. So it was always about, okay, could you do this, which is just a couple of hours. Another thing we tried, which was less successful, but we're still growing, is this initiative we have called Volunteers with Ideas. And the idea there is sometimes a volunteer might have a really great idea and we can just empower them to do it. So say, for example, a volunteer said, you know what, I just really want to write a white paper on enterprise analysis. Great, go do it, we'll publish it. So it's about, okay, here's our need, can volunteers help us with that? But also a volunteer might have a need or a want, how can we help them with that? It's that kind of two-way street.
Yeah. I hope we'll see that in all this discussion, there are these threads that all contribute to everything else. So what we talked about in terms of getting the talent pool, matching people with their interests, small tasks, governance, expectations, onboarding, all these things are all coming together.
And they're all up on
one answer.
And they're all up on the mind map right now too, behind you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Heather.
Yeah, I think that the value proposition is such an important piece. You have to understand what a person is going to do with their career. And when it stops becoming fun and it's a drudgery of work, you're not going to have engagement.
Right.
So it's fun to run a chapter. It's hard work, but it's very rewarding. And so as you sell that value proposition, and sometimes people don't even believe in themselves. So it's a matter of being a cheerleader for them, telling them, I did it. You can too. And it's going to be great. So don't forget to be a cheerleader for what you represent.
And let me use that as a segue to another question, and all of us have faced this as well. We count on our president, perhaps more than anyone, to be that cheerleader, to be the one who inspires, to be the one who recruits. Not all presidents are born good leaders, right? It's an accrued talent. It's a talent that you help develop. I'd like to hear comments on the role of the president in doing that. And we're going to go to the flip side of that. And we're also going to ask, what do you do if a president is not good at doing that?
So, I mean, I'll chip in here and say that I think one of the things I've learned and I'm learning as president is the need to communicate lots. Mm-hmm. So to make sure the board, but we have branches, members know what's happening. I mean, just to an extent that, to that extent, but also you have to be really self-aware. And I'm really fortunate in that the board colleagues I work with are great. I've worked with some of them before, I know them really well. And I know, for example, that one of my weaknesses, whatever you want to call it, is I have a tendency to react to things a little bit too soon. So I'll be the person that will reply, and maybe it doesn't need a reply, maybe it needs just a little bit of thought. But my board colleagues are great because it's like, well, they're like, oh, this is just like, but they know, and they give me feedback on that. And I think what I would encourage anyone in any situation like that to do is create the environment within the four walls of the board where anyone can say, look, you really need to, this is something you need to work on. And it's not perceived as a negative thing. It's like, actually it's an opportunity to develop a leadership capability outside of work, which you might not otherwise have got. So that cold hard facts kind of approach.
I think, Alish, you have an actual formula for this, if I remember. It's a mathematical formula. I think it's fantastic for trust.
Just say it. Okay.
Yes. Good. Can you share it?
Share it.
No, you want to see if I remember it.
I challenge you.
I'm going to try, okay?
Yeah,
You got to help me out. All right. Trust equals competency.
Yeah. Reliability.
Transparency, all divided by self-interest.
Yes.
Now you elaborate it. Tell us what it means.
If you have a lot of self-interest, no way to earn trust from members or other people. So put their interests in front of everything. So like stakeholder analysis is almost the same thing, but I want to express another word, because leadership is very close with friendship. So we are really friends in our chapter. So, and if you have a lot of good friends, it is not difficult to do something extra time or even in the night. Yeah.
Great. Peter, we've drawn who's to do what. We've done a swim lane analysis, as every good BA would do. And I think that the funny part for a president is that you need to learn to stay in your own swim lane and stop.
Yep.
And it is not easy because you think you're the big fish in the pond, that you can jump into someone else's lane and do their stuff. And you really need to focus on what you're supposed to be doing and let the others swim in their own lanes. You can help, but you need to stay in your own swim lane. Wendy knows I try to do that.
Even if you are president.
We have a couple of comments we want to get from our audience for what?
One was, Adrian, you talked about outsourcing before, and Leslie from South Africa says that they have outsourced a large portion of their membership and membership renewal process to their accountants, who tackle the administration, invoicing, and follow-up emails, etc. Which sounds very interesting. And Nicole from the Waterloo Wellington chapter actually had 2 questions. One comes from something that was said earlier and that Adrian brought back again. How do you do a branch model? And then just one more. Okay. Yeah, and she also wanted to know, she said, it would be great to have clarity around the education or experience
credits for certification, maintenance, or application certification, having a standardized credit matrix that they could use to promote and apply volunteer work.
So, I mean, taking the branch question, I'm sure Ryan will have much to add to this as well. And if anyone's considering branches, I'm sure we'd be happy to have a chat afterwards as well. I mean, we started, so the history of the UK chapter, we started based in London, as you'd imagine. It's kind of like there's a lot of financial services companies there. We then created a branch in, I think the first branch was the Midlands. The way that we found works is you have to think sustainability from the word go. So just because a couple of people say it would be nice to have an event in X, that ain't a branch. You might run a one-off branch there, but a run-off event there, it ain't a branch. And so it's about creating a committee or a task force, I should say, a task force of like-minded volunteers. Our branches aren't elected, they're enthusiastic volunteers, but providing them with the support network they need to get the job done. Now, historically, we've not done that as well as we should have done, and we're moving towards a much better place now. So now when we initiate a branch, we have a terms of reference, for example, so it's really clear what they do, what we do. We also have a very different, or a different board structure, I think, to many boards, in that we have what we call communities directors. And these communities directors, I'm visual, so humour me, but if you imagine a hub and spoke model, you've got the board in the middle, all the branches out as the spokes. The communities directors are like the latching between the branches and the hub. Of course, a branch can ring up, speak to me or anyone, but they've got a dedicated communities director to help with communication. So it's about that sustainability and creating a model to support it.
And if I could go back to some earlier comments and give this as food to thought for chapters. If you are struggling as a chapter, are there other chapters near you who are also struggling? If you're all having a problem finding a talent pool, can you not use a hub and spoke country model, perhaps to become a regional group? Are you giving up that much? You can still have local programming. We can use technology. Broaden the idea of what is a chapter. Think about what business model applies to what we're trying to do as chapters, and be creative, solve those problems.
Yeah.
Adrian, as a follow-up, somebody else was asking, is there documentation on the branch hub and spoke model for people to review?
Of course there is.
Right on your website,
Yeah,
right?
somewhere.
Well, we've got a little bit on the website. We've got more behind. I guess, Ryan, you'd have similar.
I'll say yes, but I'm not 100% sure. we don't have heavy documentation.
It's lightweight. I mean, ours is lightweight. We've got a picture. We've got a terms of reference, yeah. So if anyone wants to get in touch, we can send and have conversations.
What we do have is a branch operating manual, and we state what it means to be a branch. But we're sort of in that transition phase at the moment where we don't know what should be at chapter level and what should be at branch level. Should the branches just be running events? Should the branches be a little bit more involved? Should the chapter be doing more, who runs PDDs, who does that kind of stuff? So we're in that phase at the moment, trying to decide what goes where. And we'll probably chat to the UK chapter, since they win all these awards, and and find out.
And the comment online is lightweight is great.
Yeah, agree.
Great.
Agree.
Good job.
I wanted to switch gears and go back again to this idea of strategic planning. We talked about the business model canvas as one of those tools, and I wanted to ask each person, is there any one tool you have used, and how did it work? Right, and let's see if we can get as many different tools represented as we can. Alice?
Customer journey and customer map. So how our customers and the customers are members and the managers feel heard about us. Yep.
So capturing that whole customer experience.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, I will come back to the business model canvas, because it was quite a useful tool. The way we actually did it was we were physically there with Post-it notes. We wrote it up afterwards, and we discovered it's great because you can color code it, and you can say, you know what, we're not doing this stuff as well. This stuff's green. This stuff we're not doing very well. This stuff we're not doing at all. And it really created focus for us. I mean, we continue to work on it, of course, but it created focus.
Right?
So the short answer is no, we haven't used the tool. But what we do is we have a yearly get together where the board does a strategy session. We all come together, led by our president, and the president we chat about goals and objectives and sort of get it out in a day. And we fly people down. So we also, because we have Cape Town and Johannesburg, we fly everyone up to one place and we have that session. And that's kind of what we're doing at the moment. But it's in its infancy in terms of we've only done it for 2 years.
I find it ironic, he said he doesn't use any tools, but you brought us Zoom, and he writes mobile apps for the chapter in his spare time.
It's always that one guy.
I would be remiss, Peter, if I didn't say we've used the chapter maturity framework. Have we not, Jackie? Jackie's heard of that. I felt like, hey, as a co-creator, we better use this thing. And so we're really kind of like test driving the whole tool set, which for us means, yes, business model canvas, but it's the vision, mission, strategy piece on the top, the executive dashboard, which we're still running to get in place, the SWOT, situation assessment, external environment sensitivity on the left, and on the right is the customer experience, the customer journey. And we want to work those 5 elements over and over and over again because they all feed each other. So, Jackie, what do you think? Is it working for us?
It has helped actually immensely build growth theory this past year. And I have a lot of bad assumptions about policy positions because that's one of the things that we desperately need. We were bored doing all the work. We would go
Yeah.
a very strong out board.
Jackie, stand up and really loud.
Really loud. But it really led to us kind of following, being able to lay out where we wanted to go, why this position. And we were able to start bringing people in, one off of volunteers, and because one officer's day-to-day task broke out to 6 months.
Wow.
What would normally take, in my position, for example, during a month, 6 to where I was doing.
Excellent. And that helps with burnout.
It does help with burnout.
And it probably also helps encourage others to get involved as well.
Well, they want to.
They want to.
I think Ladie had something.
And we're in the process of using strategy maps. I first thought that it was a valuable tool to allow people to experience. Now, they don't know we're using strategy maps because I did not take up a whole session on how to do strategy maps. I started with step 1. We're now working on step 2, and I introduced the step 2, and people have been responding, et cetera. And as we go down, it's a triangle kind of format. As we get deeper and deeper, we will put together and we'll have an entire strategy map on where to go. But it's been a slow and gradual process.
Are there other tools anyone would like to mention? Anything you've used in your chapters? Things that have been helpful? Marlene? Outcome mapping. Would you like to take 2 words on that one?
Yeah, so outcome mapping is really being clear on what your outcomes are, as opposed to
Nice.
so we look for different ways to define outcomes, and then there's intermediate outcomes that come in. It's kind of a flow of mapping how it all fits together, and then some decisions around what how we want to navigate that.
Excellent. Any others? Other chapters? How important is business planning to our success going forward? If we're not doing it, so here's my question for everyone in the room, takeaways. What are we going to commit to implement in the next 3 to 6 months in our chapters? Start with the business canvas.
Good.
And
Good
we
place to
have
start.
a webinar on chapter resources page. If you'd like to review that, there's a lot of other information available. How to do a business canvas. Any others?
How about that external strategy consultant? I really like that idea. So I think that would be great to take back to our chapter.
Others? Let me go back to one other point that Curtis mentioned, and it's so critical. The bottom of that dashboard we put, or the canvas, we put the executive dashboard. There are metrics. If you're going to have key practice areas, you also want to have some way of measuring how you are doing, some key process indicator, and putting together a dashboard of what is your volunteer to board ratio, what things are trending upwards? What do you need to know? Not data for the sake of data, but what do you really need to know, and how does that help you plan?
Right.
Would anyone like to talk about data? Ladeep?
Peter, I think I am just going to commit to you, because I know you'll hold me to this, to put those right on the front page of our website. Because I think it's not important for us. You know, we're pretty binary. An event is coming or it's done. And I think the metrics and the growth and showing those kind of things are important to put right out there. I think the transparencies will hopefully be motivating.
I love that. Can I just add, pile on? Okay.
You can pile on.
Another principle, that each one reach one, is what I've talked about, but the transparency, we want to go for radical transparency. And we kind of pulled the Gandhi quote, you know, be the change you wish to see. I mean, what other professional association has the advantage of leveraging the talent of its own membership base? I mean, you know, the Association of Firefighters, they're great putting out fires. Can they leverage those skills into building their association? We have such an advantage, right? It's sometimes our weakness, we all know that, but what if we turn that around? So our whole goal is we're going to be completely transparent. So when we did the vision mission, we threw a party, and we called it a party with a purpose. We had a lot of drinks, we had sponsors, but at the end of the day, it energized people. Jackie, we had so many signups that night because we set Orlando on notice. We set the community on notice. We're here. We're going to drive the chapter like a business. Do you want to do this business planning, this with us? And we're inviting them in to do business analysis, strategic work as a chapter, and grow it together. And that does get people excited, brings them in.
And I just want to make one other note for Curtis. Every time he plans something, he gets a sponsor to support it. That's business development.
That's a great idea.
That's selling, that's influencing, that's using all of those skills. Yes, James.
You guys had any tips on engaging your members outside of the actual meeting? People will show up for the meeting.
Let me do this, James. We have a question on tips of getting people engaged outside of meetings. It is our magic hour to end. I would like to keep our line open until we get kicked out of the room. I welcome anyone to stay here, but I would like to bring the official portion of our panel discussion to a close. Please give a hand again to our panelists and to all of our contributors and to our worldwide audience and to our mind mapper and our chat monitor. Right, so thank you all for coming.